And thanks for making me doctor. At least for one evening, I became doctor. Well, 2019 remains in the history of shrimp aquaculture as the year in which the production has taken substantial dip. You know, we do have challenges right from upstream of breeding to downstream of markets. That's exactly what I'm going to discuss for the next half an hour. Emerging challenges in shrimp aquaculture value chain. Let us have a look at the numbers. We had a wonderful time ever since the introduction of Vaname in 2009. We kept growing till 2017. Even 2018 also we were doing well. More or less we were producing 7 lakh tons in both the years. There was no much of growth. But this year we're likely to take a dip of 20%. I mean, the production could go down by 1,50,000 tons. So we are going to understand why it's going down and what's happening in each segment of the value chain. If you look at the productivity, production was going up. The productivity was coming down right from the year of introduction. I mean, when Vaname got introduced in India, I mean, all the shrimp farmers were very mindful of what they're doing. They thought, you know, this is something which we are not used to, so we got to be very, very careful. We got to prepare the ponds well. We need to come up with good biosecurity. And with the background of tiger, farmers were not going for very high stocking densities also. And world has never seen these kind of sizes what India has produced in 2010 and 2011. India was producing 30 counts. I mean, nobody could ever see 30 counts coming in good numbers. I mean, India was the country that was giving all 30 counts to the world market. Till then, the world was known seeing 20 grammars, 15 grammars, 17 grammars. That's how it started. Low densities with lot of precaution, farmers have started. So the productivity was quite high. The success rates were quite good. Then what happened? The prices have gone up and farmers have become greedy. There was doing farming like there is no tomorrow. The densities have gone up and there was no rest in between the two crops. I mean, there was no respite. They were continuously stocking, and some of the farmers were not even taking the water out. In the same water, they were stocking. And whole lot of farmers have jumped onto the bandwagon. We have so many farmers limiting the carrying capacity. Everywhere, more farming started. There was a kind of an explosion of shrimp farming on most of the creeks in India. That's the time when the success rate has come down. The production has come down. Production per unit has come down. Production per million of seed, you can say, or production per hectare, it started coming down. That was between 2012 and 2017. But the production, overall production was going, but the productivity was coming down. And 2017 and all that, new diseases started emerging, further, limiting the carrying capacity. And last 2 years, I mean, though farmers were producing, it was not viable at all. And many farmers have left doing farming, and whoever are doing, they're finding it very difficult to make the farming viable. I mean, that's the story about the numbers. Let's get started with the value chain. Let us talk about the brood stock first. I mean, what happened? You know, when we were all doing tiger, we were all getting infected with white spot, and the world was not producing good quantities of shrimp. All the world put together, late 90s, we were producing only about 7 to 8 lakh tons of shrimp, less than 1 million. Then came in SPF Vaname, the domesticated stocks of Vaname. The landscape of global shrimp market has changed. From 1 million tons, we grew almost close to about 4 million tons. The major change was specific pathogen-free stocks, domesticated stocks. But at the time, the disease was white spot. But today, we're challenged with different diseases. It's not just viruses. Today, we're challenged with bacteria. I mean, how do you exclude bacteria? You can't exclude bacteria. You could exclude virus. That's what they've done with SPF. They could exclude the viruses. But today, we are challenged with bacterial diseases as well. How do you exclude bacteria? So today, we need to have tolerant stocks, resistant stocks. So most of the breeding companies have realized that. They're moving from SPF to producing resistant stocks or tolerant stocks. Every breeding company worth its salt in the world is working on resistant stocks. All the big companies. Already some of the companies have come up with resistant stocks, and some of the companies have been designated to supply the brood stock to India as well. There are other companies which are having resistant stocks, but they've not been designated to supply yet. Immediately, a CAA should come forward and designate those companies as well, because we need new genetics into the country. I mean, we're suffering. And one of the reasons why we're suffering is, if you look at all the breeding companies that are there in the market today, the genetic diversity is very, very narrow. So they're all having very less immunity towards diseases. So seeing EHP, and the prevalence has increased by the year. Today, if you look at Indian shrimp farming, EHP is endemic. It is there everywhere. I mean, we were devoid of EHP in 2012, but today if you see EHP as endemic, where did it come from? Definitely must have come from Thailand. I mean, you could understand it from the slide what she has shown, my earlier speaker, Diva. I will also show that same slide. If you look at the cohort study done by Dr. Fliesel in 2013, I mean, random samples they've taken. They have not taken the samples from disease-infected ponds. They've taken random samples, 200 random samples they've taken. 49% out of the samples what they've collected, they're EHP infected. That was the time a lot of broodstock was coming from Thailand. 2011, 2012, up till 2013, July, a lot of stock has come from Thailand. And we didn't have EHP on the list of diseases that has to be screened in quarantine. It's not their mistake, because it's not listed by OIE. So they have not kept it as in their screening list. So, and this disease, as she told, it's a very, very sticky disease. It's not going to leave your system all that easily. It's not just about the stocks which have come from Thailand during that point of time. Even the stocks which have come from US, which are devoid of EHP, they also might have been infected, because we were not disinfecting the quarantine for EHP. The procedure is not in place. So disease must have come into the country that way. So what we understand from this is two things are very important from this, from this whole EHP thing. One thing is, bringing the stocks from large shrimp scale producing countries is not viable at all, not at all advisable, because most of the diseases, right from white spot till EHP, they all started in large scale shrimp farming countries. Where did WSSV start? Taiwan. Where did AHP&D start? Again, China. Where did EHP start? Thailand. And if it goes to the broodstock, it's going to devastate the shrimp farming. If you have a disease somewhere in the country, it's not going to spread. But if it is coming through the broodstock, it's going to spread very fast. You're bringing, say, about 500 pairs of broodstock coming into the country. That 500 could produce about, say, about 750 to 1,000 million. And that 1,000 million could be stocked in about 15,000 acres to 20,000 acres. I mean, the disease is going to spread to different parts of the country. 20,000 acres is not small. I mean, it could be covering all the states. That's how the disease spreads very, very fast from the broodstock. So we got to be really, really careful when we are importing the broodstock. I mean, we should avoid broodstock coming from large-scale shrimp farming countries. And whenever a disease is known in any part of the country, in any part of the world, whether it is listed by OIE or not, it has to be added to the list of diseases that have to be screened in the quarantine. That is very, very important. Today, somebody would say SHIV, we don't need to be worried about. It doesn't have economic significance. But whenever a disease comes, it starts slowly. Then it picks up the steam. And then after some time, it grows to an epidemic proportion. Same happened with EHP. I mean, when they found out EHP initially, they thought it's not of much of economic significance. But eventually what happened? I mean, it's killing the industry, both in Thailand and India. So any disease, when it is reported in any part of the world, it has to be added to the list of diseases to be screened, whether it is listed by OIE or not. I mean, looking at the larger interest of the industry in view. And coming to the hatcheries, today, hatcheries cannot use the wet feeds. I mean, my preceding speakers, both of them, they spoke about it. I mean, you cannot use wet feeds. You have to use SPF polychaetes, or you use them after pasteurizing. If you pasteurize them, you can kill all the diseases, all the pathogens. I mean, if you're freezing them, as Diva has told earlier, you can make EHP inactive. But you pasteurize, you can kill all the pathogens. And it is definitely going to give good results. So all the hatchery operators should switch over from using wet feeds directly to pasteurized feeds. You know, not many hatcheries in India are doing that presently. And the other thing is, they have to revisit the rinsing process. I mean, when we were doing a tiger, we used to go for individual spawning, and we used to thoroughly wash eggs and naupliae. And after introduction of Vaname, most of the hatcheries have stopped doing that because it's SPF. But today we are challenged by different set of diseases. I mean, the challenges are different today. The diseases, what we have today, were different, bacterial as well as EHP. So we need to revisit the washing of eggs and naupliae again. And many hatcheries have started doing that. This is the second thing. The third thing is, like, no matter what you follow in your hatchery, the procedure, the most important thing is you need to screen your broodstock randomly. Then only you can come to understand what you're doing is right or wrong. I mean, the procedure, what you're following for making the feed sterile is working or not, you'll come to understand. At least weekly once, you need to screen the broodstock for all the emerging diseases, EHP, white feces, of course, the etiology is not known, bacteria, and even white spot for that matter. I mean, random screening of broodstock is periodic random screening of broodstock is very, very important. Then only you'll come to understand your broodstock is not having any disease. If you're just screening the seed, it might not be enough. Sometimes PCR might not capture the disease in the seed stock level. So if you're screening the broodstock, it's foolproof. So this is what hatcheries have to do. And they have to avoid using antibiotics, to be in line with the market, because the world requires shrimps devoid of antibiotics. I mean, we all know one of the reasons why we are not able to sell to Europe is because of antibiotic residual loads. Apart from that, if you're using antibiotics, you're going to kill all the weak bacteria. But the most pathogenic bacteria is going to stay in the system, and it's going to proliferate. Then, if hatcheries continue to operation with the pathogenic bacteria inside the system, they're going to give the inoculum to the farmers. I mean, along with the seed, they're going to give inoculum of bacteria, which could further damage in the culture systems. Coming to the farm, I mean, many things have been covered. Again, we need to control the bacteria. You could control the bacteria by doing nursery operation. Through nurseries, you can keep viral pathogens at bay. At the same time, you can control the bacterial loads. And many of the farmers have started using nurseries and started seeing good results in India. And you need to treat your water differently. I mean, if your water is having a lot of turbidity, a lot of bacteria is going to be there, so you need to get rid of your organic carbon. I mean, do it through sedimentation by keeping many reservoirs in place. And you can also use polyaluminium chloride to get rid of the organic carbon and to make the water more clear. If you're having bore water as a source, then you don't need to do all these things. Okay, you can treat the water, you can get good seed free of diseases, but how do you treat your soil? I mean, if you have lined ponds, okay, you go for sodium hydroxide treatment or some other alkaline treatment to get rid of the spores. But how are you going to get rid of the spores when they're there in the soil? The spores are so small and they're mingled with all the soil particles. So there are many recommendations for pond bottom treatment, but nothing seems to be working. I mean, that's the big problem what the farmers are facing. So it's not coming from water, it's not coming through the seed, but it's coming from the preceding crop. The spores are there in the soil. So how do you eradicate them? I mean, we have a whole lot of recommendations, but none of the recommendations seem to be giving good results, be it sodium hydroxide or calcium oxide or formalin or ethanol. Nothing seems to be working, but because that's distributed in the soil. So the only solution looks to be going for lining, but how many farmers can go for lining? There's so many small farmers in the country. How could they go for lining? So this is a serious problem. And we want to get to the bottom of the problem, like the way what Mahidol University is doing. We're also working on a project. We at Society of Aquaculture Professionals, we are working along with University of Arizona, and we took the help of RGCA also. They're kind enough to give their lab. And we did all the molecular tests there, 155 samples, and we have sent the samples to University of Arizona for histology. We are doing molecular tests. Our doubt is there could be some other enteric pathogen, because out of the molecular tests what we have done, 155, 12 of them have not come positive for EHP. But still, we could see the classic symptoms of white feces. So it's not just EHP, there is something else, is pretty evident. But how do you figure out? I mean, we need to know whether there is any other enteric pathogen. All the known pathogens we have tested by PCR, and we could not detect any other pathogen other than EHP in these samples. And 12 samples, we could not get anything. So probably histology could give us some solution, whether there is any other unknown enteric pathogen. I mean, that could be the possibility is what we're thinking. And sludge removal and collection pits, I mean, what people are doing is they're collecting the sludge and throwing back into the creek, making the water even worse. So, I mean, like our friend Manoj Sharma always suggests, you know, you need to collect the sludge and dispose it properly. Otherwise, you're giving more problems. You know, that seems to be working. A lot of farmers are following that. They're not throwing back the sludge into the creek or the source of water. They're collecting it in a pit and disposing it properly. And regular water exchange could help. If you're having good reservoir, after treating the whole water, what is coming in, the same water, if you're using for exchange, it could help. I mean, for controlling the bacterial loads. And where do we get the solutions? From other sources other than genetics, husbandry. It could come from nutrition. I mean, it's not just in our shrimp industry. In so many other husbandry, there were immunity-enhancing feeds which were helping. And even in shrimp aquaculture, also some of the feeds which are immunity-enhancing, they're helping in other countries. And even in India, we have companies producing immunity-enhancing feeds and growth-enhancing feeds. They look to be giving good results. And one school of thought is that whatever feed we have today, the formulation is compromised because the raw material costs are going up, whereas they're not able to increase the price because of competition. That could also be contributing to this problem is what is one school of thought. The problem is not straitjacket. It is definitely multifactorial. It could be coming from the broodstock because the broodstock is becoming less immune and our carrying capacities have come down and there is an explosion of shrimp farming and the feed is compromised. All put together could be contributing the problems what we're seeing today. And now I'll discuss a little bit about the markets. See, the whole world market is about 3.5 million tons or so. And India is the leader. We produce about 700,000 tons, 7 lakh tons, and we export close to about 5,80,000 tons because 80% of the product goes as headless. But who is the major consumer in the world? Who is the number one consumer? European Union. They eat about 8,56,000 tons. And there we are giving very, very less quantity, about 50, 60,000. It's a pittance. As a number one exporting country, as a number one producing country, we should take the lion's share of European market, but we're not able to do that. That's one of the undoings why the shrimp prices are low in India, because we're too focused on two markets, US and China. Other than these two markets, we're not selling anywhere else. Even if we're selling very less quantities. And exporters need to move up the value chain. We need to go for more value addition. Today, we export it to Vietnam. Vietnam adds value and exports it to Europe. If we add value, it's going to fetch us a better price, and the exporter could pass it on to farmer. And we need to move up the value chain in terms of distribution also. As a number one exporter and a number one producer, we should have our distribution networks in consuming markets. Our exporters have to set up distribution networks in the importing countries. And one could say, how can they do that? They're not all that big and all that. But today our exporters are very big. Some of them have gone for public, and some of them have gone very, very big. They can set up their shop in the shrimp consuming countries as well. That has to be done. I mean, the more close we go to the consumer, the better price we realize. And we need to work on the new markets. We are not there in Korea. We are not there in Australia. We are not there in a lot of Eastern Bloc European countries. I mean, we need to be there. A lot of shrimps go from India to London. Again, they get reprocessed and sold to other European countries. We got to be there in each and every shrimp consuming country as a number one producer and as a number one exporter. Our friend is there all the way, all over. Ecuador is selling to every country. She's here also. She must be having some trick up her sleeve, you know. She came here to watch out what is happening with our competitors. Whereas we don't get to see what's happening in Ecuador. And we don't get to understand how they're selling to different countries. And the other big market is domestic market. I mean, the country with burgeoning population, with 1.35 billion population, and we have good demographic dividend. 65% of the population is below 35 years. And the whole world is looking at Indian market. But as an industry, we're not able to sell to the Indian market. One of the major reasons is we don't have cold chain. I mean, people like Manoj Sharma has come up with a restaurant, Jingalala. I mean, he's trying to, bring the concept of shrimp eating. He wants to make it popular. But we need to have proper cold chain. If it has to go to the hinterland, we need to have the cold chain. And if you look at the cold chain, part of the cold chain is already there with the processors now. They have the processing plant at the farming areas, and they have the refrigerated vehicles. What they require is some kind of cold storages in the marketplace, in the big cities, and for distributing the shrimps, frozen shrimps there, they need to have small refrigerated vehicles. As they have part of the cold chain already with them, they should come forward and try to establish the domestic market. I mean, the chances for them to succeed are very, very high because they already have the infrastructure with them. And excuse me. Please, make it large now. F5, right? Okay. This is the light. Where is the pointer? Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, if you look at the figures, when we were producing about 475 or so in year 15-16, we have given about 80,000 to EU. Whereas the subsequent years, our production has gone up, but our share to EU has come down. I mean, it has come down to 77,000, and last year we produced close to 7 lakh tons, but our export to EU has come to a level of 69,000 tons. And why we are not able to give to EU? The reason is antibiotic residual loads. For other countries, they check 10% of the shipments. For India, they check about 50% of the shipments. And if any shipment is found to have antibiotic residue loads, antibiotic loads or antibiotic residue, immediately they're delisted. They're delisted and they're banned, and afterwards the exporter finds it difficult to export it to the other countries as well. That's why they're all shying away to export it to EU. And the other development is, recent development is, Vietnam has entered into a free trade agreement with the EU. So they get about 6% advantage. We have about 6% tariffs to EU, whereas Vietnam doesn't have any tariffs. Means Vietnamese shrimp is cheaper by 6%. So why would they come to India? But this is a trade issue. Industry cannot do much about it because there's so much of trade going in between EU and India. So government takes a call, keeping all that in view. It is beyond industry. But what we can do from industry, we can work on antibiotic residual loads. We can see to that we don't produce shrimps that are having antibiotic residues. I mean, everybody from the industry has to stand up and take the responsibility. If you look at the hatcheries, they think we're using at ppm levels and it will never get caught. I mean, we use 10 ppm and all that. But when they screen the brood shrimps, they're screening at ppb levels, and it's going to get caught. It gets into the tissue and it's going to be there. It's going to get caught. So hatcheries have to completely do away with antibiotics. As such, if they go for probiotics and all that, their efficiencies are also going to increase. And shrimp farmers, they don't know what they're putting in, because all the products that are being sold they're not registered. Some of the products are registered, some of the products are not registered. So farmers have to be conscious of what they're putting in to the pond. They have to be mindful. And the agencies also have to register all the products that are available, not just few products. Then comes the exporter. He is buying the material, but he doesn't screen it and buy. He takes it from an agent, and the agent gets it from different ponds. And the integrity of the lot is not maintained. The shrimps are not just coming from one pond. One lot means it comes from 4 or 5 ponds. Actually, the lot has to be identified and it has to be defined. It has to be just one pond. But it's not coming like that. That is another issue. The other issue, if you see in Andhra, farmers culture both fish and shrimp. When fish rates are good, they do fish. When shrimp rates are good, they switch over to fish. And antibiotics are profusely used in fish ponds. And next crop, when it's going for shrimp, those antibiotics are going to get into the shrimp. So somebody has to monitor fish ponds also. And who is the authority? FSSA. Food Security and Standards Authority of India, they should control fish ponds. They should monitor fish ponds. Whether the fish farmer is using antibiotic or not, it has to be monitored by FSSA. Once it is monitored, the farmers are safe. The farmers who are doing shrimp in fish ponds, they're safe. Their shrimp are not going to have any antibiotic residues. I conclude here by saying it's about time to understand the emerging diseases better and go for changes and innovations in genetics, husbandry practices of hatcheries and farms, feed formulation, and also work on markets to help the Indian shrimp industry to stay on growth trajectory. Thank you very much for patient listening. Thank you, sir.